Hello and welcome to BYJU'S IAS. Till the time elections are over and even afterwards, till the next government is sworn in, there will be lot many political news splashed across the newspapers. Most of them are irrelevant for your exams. For example, news on seat sharing agreement, political speeches, etc., etc. But sometimes, somewhere, there will be an important statement or an issue embedded in these news articles, and it is important to extract them for your exams. We at BYJU'S will ensure that all such important concepts, statements are picked and delivered to you so that you don't have to read the newspaper from end to end. Now let's get started, beginning with a news item on page number 1 of the Delhi edition of the Hindu. Manohar Parrikar, four-time Goa Chief Minister and former Defence Minister of India, is dead. Now this newspaper article per se is not important, but there is a polity concept, a very important polity concept embedded in this newspaper article, which the Hindu newspaper has not mentioned. And what is that? Constitution talks about that there shall be Council of Ministers headed by the Prime Minister to aid and advise the President. And the President shall act on the aid and advice of the Council of Ministers headed by the Prime Minister. The same Constitution also talks about that there shall be Council of Ministers headed by the Chief Minister to aid and advise the Governor. And the Governor shall act on the aid and advice of the Council of Ministers headed by the Chief Minister. But what happens if the Chief Minister resigns? And what happens if the Chief Minister is dead? The resignation of the Chief Minister is similar to the resignation of the entire Council of Ministers. That is what we call collective responsibility. That means the ministers individually need not send their resignations to the governor. The resignation of the Chief Minister is sufficient. That means the resignation of the Chief Minister is the resignation of the entire Council of Ministers. Similarly, the death of the Chief Minister is the death of the Council of Ministry as well. That means with the death of the Chief Minister of Goa, there is no government in Goa right now. A new Chief Minister is to be sworn in by the Governor of Goa, and on the advice of the new Chief Minister, new Council of Ministers should also be brought in. That means the Chief Minister and his Council of Ministers are to be sworn in afresh. As of now, there is no government in Goa because with the death of the Chief Minister, it is the death of the entire Council of Ministry as well. And that is what we call collective responsibility of the cabinet. And that is what you need to understand from this newspaper article. Now let's look at another news on page number 1. The Lokpal Act was passed in the year 2013. But till date, we do not have a Lokpal. If this newspaper article is to be believed, then Justice P.C. Ghose is said to be India's first Lokpal. Now what is Lokpal? Lokpal is basically responsible for inquiring into corruption charges, and that too at the national level. That means Lokpal is an institution. It is an anti-corruption institution which is responsible for inquiring into corruption charges at the national level. But corruption charges against whom? All categories of public servants. And these public servants include Prime Minister. But there are a few important statements that we need to understand from the prelims perspective that can be relevant for your prelims 2019. Number 1, this Lokpal as an institution, it is called as Ombudsman, and we have borrowed this concept of Ombudsman from Sweden. That's number 1. Number 2, armed forces do not come under the ambit of Lokpal. That's another important statement. Statement number 3, let's say for example you are a public servant and you have acquired this property. But you have acquired this property through corrupt means. And now there is an investigation going on in your case. Even if the investigation is going on, that means till date you have not been prosecuted, you have not been sentenced by the court, only the investigation is going on. But the Lokpal Act states that this property which you have acquired through corrupt means and there is an investigation going on in your case right now, this property can be confiscated, this property can be attached under the Lokpal Act. That means the Lokpal Act states that there is a provision for the attachment or confiscation of the property which has been acquired through corrupt means, despite the fact that you have not been prosecuted. That means even while the prosecution is pending, your property which you have acquired through corrupt means can be confiscated, can be attached as well. That's third important concept. Fourth important concept is, let's say for example, you are a public servant, but your case is not being investigated right now. There is a corruption charge, corruption allegation against you, but no investigative agency has as of now taken upon themselves to investigate this case. Under the Lokpal Act, the Lokpal can summon this public servant if there exists a prima facie case against you. That means although no investigation agency, for example vigilance or CBI, they have still not started a probe against your allegations, but the Lokpal can summon or question any public servant if there is a prima facie case against that person. Now the Lokpal can, let's say for example, refer this complaint to the CBI, and now CBI investigate all these corruption allegations against you. And the Lokpal Act states that any officer of the CBI who is investigating this case which has been referred to it by the Lokpal, this officer shall not be transferred without the approval of the Lokpal. That means any officer of the CBI who is investigating a case referred to it by the Lokpal, he or she shall not be transferred without the approval of the Lokpal. And the Lokpal Act states that an investigation must be completed within 6 months. But then the investigative agency, let's say for example the CBI, can request the Lokpal that we need more time investigating this particular case. In that case, Lokpal can allow extension as well. The Act also states that there shall be special courts which will be instituted to conduct trials on those cases which are referred by the Lokpal. But what if somebody files a false case or a frivolous or a vexatious complaint before the Lokpal? In this case, the Lokpal can award a fine of up to 2 lakh rupees against someone who is filing a false or a frivolous or a vexatious litigation. Now what is the composition of Lokpal? Lokpal will consist of a chairperson and a maximum of 8 members. Very important statement for your prelims. Maximum 8 members. And all these individuals, chairperson and the 8 members, they will be appointed by a panel. And this panel will consist of Prime Minister, Lok Sabha Speaker, Leader of Opposition in Lok Sabha, the Chief Justice of India, and an eminent jurist. And who is this eminent jurist? In the current case, it is Mr. Mukul Rohatgi, the former Attorney General of India. But how is this eminent jurist appointed? This eminent jurist is recommended by these 4 individuals: Prime Minister, Leader of Opposition in Lok Sabha Speaker, and the Chief Justice of India. And this eminent jurist must be appointed through consensus. A very important statement. That means eminent jurist is appointed to this panel not through majority vote but through consensus. And now this panel has got together, and in all likelihood Justice P.C. Ghose is said to be India's first Lokpal. But what about Leader of Opposition in Lok Sabha, Mallikarjun Kharge? This statement is wrong. The current Lok Sabha does not have a Leader of Opposition. Any party which gets more than 1/10 of the seats of Lok Sabha, which is equivalent to 55 Lok Sabha MPs, this party's leader can be accorded with the status of Leader of Opposition. Since no political party in the current Lok Sabha has got more than 1/10 of the seats in Lok Sabha, therefore we do not have Leader of Opposition in Lok Sabha. But Mr. Mallikarjun Kharge is the leader of the single largest party in Lok Sabha, which is the Congress party. And Mr. Mallikarjun Kharge had refused to participate in this panel meeting. Why? Because he was not given the status of Leader of Opposition. He was invited to this meeting as a special invitee. That is what you need to understand from this newspaper article. Now let's look at another news on page number 1. Only 26% of rural toilets use twin-leach pit technology. Now let's understand this newspaper article in great detail. We have something called excreta and there is something called fecal sludge. What is the difference between the two? Excreta is urine plus feces. And what is fecal sludge? It is excreta plus anything else. But what is this anything else? It can be menstrual hygiene products, for example, sanitary pads. It can be kitchen water. It can be garbage. It can be solid waste. It can be anything. That means excreta is urine plus feces. Fecal sludge is excreta plus anything else. Now when toilets are to be constructed, it is important that twin-leach pit technology is used. Let's say for example, this is a toilet. Two pits are to be constructed. There are two pits. The size and capacity of these pits can vary depending upon the number of users. Normally the capacity is designed so that this pit can last for 3 years. When we say it can last for 3 years, that doesn't mean that after 3 years new pit is to be constructed, but it only means that the storage capacity of these pits should be for 3 years. Now both these pits are used alternatively. Let's say for example, when this pit is closed, that means all the fecal sludge will enter into this pit A. When this pit A is full, then this valve will be closed and then the excreta or the fecal sludge will enter into pit B. That means both the pits are used alternatively. When one pit is full, the incoming excreta is diverted to the second pit. Now see what happens. Let's say for example, we are using pit A for the first time. After 2 years normally, the fecal sludge gets digested because we don't use cement at the bottom of this pit. This fecal sludge is digested by the earth. It is almost dry and it is also pathogen free. And therefore, this fecal sludge can be used as a manure. That means this digested sludge is odorless, without any smell, and it is a good manure and it's a soil conditioner. That means you have to dig this pit and you can extract the manure. That is why it is very important that when toilets are constructed, we employ this two-pit technology or this two-pit system so that this fecal sludge, once it is digested, it can be used as a manure as well. But what this newspaper article talks about, it says only 26% of the rural toilets, they use this twin-leach pits. That is what you need to understand from this newspaper article. Now let's look at another news on page number 7. After the Pulwama attack, then we had the Indian Air Force targeting Balakot. And this newspaper article says that key naval assets were put on alert. And there are few important things from the prelims perspective that you need to keep a track of. Number 1, INS Vikramaditya. This is India's only aircraft carrier, only naval aircraft carrier. And we have borrowed this INS Vikramaditya from Russia. In Russia, it was known as Admiral Gorshkov, but this Admiral Gorshkov was purchased by India from Russia. It was refurbished by Russia and is now called INS Vikramaditya. We have another project called INS Vikrant. This is India's first aircraft carrier which is built in India, but this will be commissioned into Indian Navy hopefully in the year 2021. So that is one thing that you need to understand from this newspaper article. Second is Malabar 2017. What is this Malabar exercise? It is basically a trilateral naval exercise. The navies of 3 countries, India, US and Japan, they participate in this Malabar exercise. This can be another potential statement for your prelims examination. And then we have something called TROPEX. What is TROPEX? Theater Level Operational Readiness Exercise. What is this TROPEX? TROPEX is an inter-service military exercise. That means it involves the participation of Indian Army. It involves the participation of Indian Air Force, Navy, as well as the Coast Guard. This TROPEX exercise began for the first time in the year 2005. A very important statement for your prelims. Second important statement, it is held annually, every year. Third important statement, it's a month-long exercise. Fourth important statement, for the year 2016, this TROPEX exercise was not conducted. But what is the purpose of TROPEX? The purpose is to check whether these forces are ready for combat or not. To check whether the assets of Army, Air Force, Navy, Coast Guard, whether they are combat ready or not. And the purpose is also to ensure and strengthen the coordination between all these entities. Coordination between Army, Navy, Indian Air Force and the Coast Guard. That is what you need to understand from this newspaper article. Now let's look at some of the editorials and columns from today's newspaper. There is an editorial on the horrific attack on a mosque at Christchurch in New Zealand in which 49 people lost their lives, but that is something my colleague has discussed in detail. Now there is a column written by Gopal Krishna Gandhi, an election that is not about one. Primarily this is a political article, but there is one important statement that you need to understand from this newspaper column. Tomorrow there can be an essay topic on idea of India. Or you might be asked in your interview, what is your idea of India? There are a few important points that you need to understand, and that is what Gopal Krishna Gandhi talks about. Number one, parliamentary democracy. The preamble talks about we the people of India having solemnly resolved to constitute India into a sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic. But when we talk about democracy, we do not have a presidential form of democracy, but we have a parliamentary form of democracy where voters elect their MPs. These MPs get together and then they choose the Prime Minister. We do not have a presidential form of democracy in India. But the election of 2014 and the election of 2019 is fought on presidential style. In 2014, it was Modi versus Rahul. Now in 2019, it is Modi versus Mahagathbandhan, or it is Modi versus who? But that is not the idea of India. The idea of India is a parliamentary democracy, not the presidential form of democracy. Second, the idea of India is where the opposition is also respected, where the opposition is given its due respect. Because it is this opposition that will hold the executive accountable. It is this opposition that will hold the executive accountable on the streets as well as inside parliament as well. So in your idea of India, opposition should be respected as well. Your idea of India should also be where every region, where every language, where every faith is also respected. That means your idea of India in which every region, language and faith is equal of every other. Your idea of India where the judiciary should be independent. Your idea of India where bureaucracy has to follow certain traits: impartiality, integrity, non-partisanship, at the same time anonymity. That means bureaucracy should work in the background and let the political class take the onus. Let the political class be the face and bureaucracy should be anonymous. But this bureaucracy should not be committed to the ideology of the political party in power. This bureaucracy should be non-partisan. Your idea of India should be such where the wealth in forests, mines should not be looted. Your idea of India where prisoners do not live in subhuman conditions. And your idea of India should be such where constitution is seen as dynamic, as a living guardian of the citizens' human rights pertaining to life, liberty, privacy and judicial remedy. That is what Gopal Krishna Gandhi says, that this election is about a fight between contrasting claims of the idea of India. So there is one idea of India which does not value any of these important traits, but there is another idea of India which should value all these important traits, and that is what this election is all about. Now let's look at another column, Nehru, China and the Security Council seat, written by Muhammad Ayub. Now what is the context? China has once again blocked the UN resolution to designate Maulana Masood Azhar as a global terrorist. China has put something what is called technical hold, and this China has done repeatedly. When China did it again, the opposition Congress party accused the government of a failure in diplomacy. Arun Jaitley, the finance minister, then talked about original sinner. And according to Mr. Jaitley, the original sinner is Pandit Nehru. Because according to Mr. Jaitley, India was promised and offered a United Nations Security Council seat, a permanent seat on Security Council, but Pandit Nehru gifted this seat to China. And if the opposition is accusing the government for what China did at United Nations, they should blame the original sinner, and who is Pandit Nehru. But now let's understand the facts and let's extract facts from the myth. When United Nations was formed in the year 1945, one of the most important organs of United Nations is the United Nations Security Council. And there are 5 permanent members of this United Nations Security Council. When the UN Charter was signed in the year 1945, the 5 permanent members were United States, USSR, basically those who were the victors after the Second World War. But then in China, there was a civil war, and the Chinese government was ousted. Communist takeover of China took place. The government of China, headed by Chiang Kai-shek, was ousted, and then the communists decided to take over the China. And these communists called themselves People's Republic of China. But even then, on this United Nations Security Council, it was the ousted government of Chiang Kai-shek, which was based in Taiwan. They continued to occupy this permanent seat on United Nations Security Council. But then Pandit Nehru objected. Pandit Nehru argued, how can a small island nation claim a permanent seat on United Nations Security Council? This is where feelers were sent to India by the United States. What are these feelers? United States foreign policy was focused on how should we contain the spread of socialism? How should we contain the spread of communism in the world? Their entire foreign policy was focused on that there are newly independent nations in Asia and Africa. We should prevent these nations from falling in the lap of this socialism or communism. So since there was a communist revolution in China, and since this Chiang Kai-shek government was ousted and it was based out of Taiwan, it was no longer tenable that this small island nation will be provided a permanent seat on United Nations Security Council. And United States wanted that People's Republic of China should not be part of United Nations Security Council. They started sending feelers to India that you should be given a permanent seat on United Nations Security Council. But Pandit Nehru thought that this would be injustice to China, and Pandit Nehru rejected these feelers. But it is important to point out that it was never an offer. It was only a feeler was given to India that you will be provided a permanent seat on United Nations Security Council. Pandit Nehru rejected these feelers and thought that it would be injustice to China, and People's Republic of China should be given a place on United Nations Security Council. But later on, various experts on international relations say that Pandit Nehru did the right thing. Because if China was to be replaced by India on United Nations Security Council, for that a resolution should have been passed by United Nations Security Council members. But at that point in time, Russia could have vetoed this. Because Russia and People's Republic of China, they were close allies at that point in time. So if Russia would have vetoed the entry of India, then ultimately India and Russia relationship would have got weakened. India and China relationship would also have got weakened. That is why India did the right thing at that point in time. They rejected this feeler because after all, it was never an offer. And the writer says that this proved effective later on during the 1971 war between India and Pakistan. At that point in time, United States sent its fleet to help Pakistani army. But it was at that point in time that Russia also got involved, and it was at this point in time that Russia came to the rescue of India and ultimately defeated Pakistan, which led to the emergence of Bangladesh as an independent country. That is what you need to understand from this newspaper article. Now let's look at another column on page number 9. The problem is jobs, not wages. This is written by Praveen Chakravarti, who belongs to the Congress party. So basically this is a political article, but there are two important things that you need to understand even from a political article. Post 1991, economic reforms, liberalization, privatization, globalization, it has led to increase in the GDP of this country. That means the growth has increased, GDP has grown. But even this growth rate has been criticized by many, and it has been referred to as jobless growth. That means despite the fact that there has been increase in GDP consistently since 1991, but this period is called as jobless growth. Today there is a huge controversy on the unemployment data. Some say the unemployment as of now is at a 45-year high. Some say no, but it is at a 2-year high. Some say no, the jobs have been created. Look at what Uber is doing. Look at what Ola is doing. Look at what Oyo is doing. Jobs have been created. But there are others who say the problem is not jobs. The problem is wages. That means jobs are getting created, but wages are not sufficient. There are two things that we need to understand from this newspaper article. Number one, those who say that the problem is not the jobs, but the wages, Mr. Praveen Chakravarti says this argument is very silly. This argument is similar to somebody saying that every Indian who wants to buy a house can buy a house, but it is just that the price is not affordable. Second, even if we agree that it is not the problem with the jobs, but it is problem with the wages, then it amounts to labor market failure. And what is this labor market failure? That means basically the Infosys, TCS, Wipro, they are creating jobs. They are giving jobs to the people. But at the same time, they are working in such a manner that they keep the wages low and force the youth to apply for these low wages jobs, low paying jobs. And this is what we call labor market failure. And the solution to this labor market failure then would be that the workers should come together, start establishing unions, and these unions will then demand from their employers higher wages. That is why Praveen Chakravarti says that the problem is jobs. It is not with the wages. These are the two things that you need to understand from this newspaper column. Now let's look at some of the prelims based questions. Number one, which of the following statement is or are correct? It has been made mandatory for public servants to declare their assets and liabilities along with that of their spouse and dependent children. Yes, according to Lokpal Act, this is something that every public servant has to do. Second, the Lokpal will have the power of superintendence and direction over any investigation agency, excluding CBI for cases referred to them by the Ombudsman. This is wrong. Including CBI. That means when Lokpal will refer to CBI any case, then Lokpal will have the power of superintendence over CBI for those matters. That is why this statement is wrong. So which of the above statements are correct? Only one. Second, which vertebrate classes have three-chambered hearts? Amphibians and reptiles. Human heart is a four-chambered heart. And why this question has been asked? Because on the last page of today's The Hindu newspaper, this is the article that has been mentioned. Map-based question, arrange the following countries from east to west. The solution is Philippines, then Indonesia, then Malaysia, and then Thailand. So what is the correct answer? D. Previous year's question paper, Prelims 2013. Which one of the following describes best the concept of nirvana in Buddhism? The answer is A, the extinction of the flame of desire. That is it from our newspaper analysis for today. Thank you for watching. Have a great day.